I'll call the meeting to order. We have our regular meeting number 646 of our Lake Pend School District. Welcome, everyone. And we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. There are no public comments, so we are going to go straight into a financial update from our Chief Financial and Operations Officer, Lisa Hall. Thank you.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
Let's see, the last time I presented to you was January 9th, and a fair bit has happened on the federal and state level to report out to you. So I think I'll start on the federal level, where the federal government, whose budget cycle starts on October 1st, still yet has to adopt a budget for the current budget cycle we're in. They continue to use continuing resolutions, so we as a school district, we as a nation are still operating on estimates. We have about $5 billion in federal funds in our budget. Yesterday was the 12th of February, President Trump released his 2019, next year, budget request. Major increases in defense spending, 14% increase, plus infrastructure and border wall construction included. Really big cuts to some departments. The Environmental Protection Agency, 25% cut. Department of State, 23% cut. And the Department of Education, a 5% cut. President Trump's budget request for this year, to remind you, included a 12% cut to the Department of Education. But also, as you know, the budget that President Trump released in May of 2017 also called for major increases to defense spending and cuts to other departments, which Congress, has not acted on those recommendations. Mm-hmm. I did get a chance today to look through kind of more of an executive summary because the federal budget is a large document. And for the programs that President Trump for 2019 budget cycle, he continues to recommend eliminating Title II. For us, that's $140,000 currently. We've estimated for this year, but we still don't know that figure. And also to eliminate a program that's been in existence at Clark Fork called the Gear Up program, which is meant to educate students on higher education opportunities. The state of Idaho is not assuming any impact, negative impact, I guess I should say, for fiscal cycle 18. And in speaking with Senator Keogh yesterday in a conference call with our board and some administrators, she predicted that if there was something on the federal level that really had a negative impact on Idaho's budget, that Governor Otter would call a special session to address that. Mm-hmm. If I switch now just to Lake Pend School District, we too have started our fiscal year 18-19 budget work and projections. Generally, I make a sort of a financial overview, our first meeting in April, and then the board works it's the board's responsibility under the Constitution to adopt a budget through April into early May. Sean had a great idea to approach Thorne, which is one of the larger employers here and has been relocating to North Carolina. They have committed, they know they have 100 employees moving to North Carolina, and they have been willing for those that are moving within the boundaries of our school district to do a survey that we configured to ask for specificity on if they had children in the district, and if so, what grades and what schools, and if they intend to continue to have the students in our district, or if they will also move. In this case, unlike when the largest employer, Coldwater Creek, declared bankruptcy after we had adopted our budget, it was a major negative impact to the tune of over $650,000.
Right.
And so again, we're appreciative of Thorne being willing to work with the school district to help in our budget planning. Now I'll just take the remainder of tonight's comments to talk about what's been going on in the state since January 9th. On January 29th, there was a joint session of the House and the Senate Ed Committees, and it's been years since I remember a joint session between the House and Senate Ed Committees, and the purpose of that was to have Representative Foreman, who has been the co-chair of the K-12 Funding Formula Committee, to give kind of a 2-year update to the legislators. She also explained that in early February that there would be a resolution, one asking for another year's worth of appropriation for the interim committee to go into year 3 to continue its work, but also to summarize the items that are that the committee's reached agreement on. But it's February 13th and it still hasn't been released. I did ask Representative Dixon as of last Friday if that document existed. I haven't heard back from him yet. Representative Dixon I also posed some other questions earlier this month, and was any legislation going to be introduced as a result of the first 2 years of the Funding Formula Committee's work, and the answer was no, except again to continue the work for 1 more year. When Representative Foreman was reporting out to this joint House and Senate Ed Committee, she re-articulated that there's no agreement on the local contribution. In other words, they are not recommending any portion of the state funding formula incorporate a non-voter approved property tax component. She also said there was a lot of work to be done on what categories of students would generate different weights over the base, and that she also saw that they would be using it's basically a very sophisticated Excel spreadsheet to work on potential weight and to see how that would affect varying school districts, because we have very, very rural school districts and then just a handful of what we would call urban districts in our state. The things to just recapitulate that they have agreed on, recommending to go to enrollment-based funding, that they would have a base student amount and then have weights for different types of students, that they would recommend implementing fully year 4, year 5 of the teacher career ladder allocation module, and that they will not address facilities. The state also has various committees, as I told you in the past, that develop revenue forecasts, and because of the dramatic impact of the federal tax legislation that passed in December 22, 2017, it kind of took longer than normal, but on January 19th, the Economic Outlook and Revenue Assessment Committee agreed with Governor Otter's forecast of a 5.3% increase in revenues for fiscal year 19. And JFAC has also adopted that projection. Many times the governor's projection, the Economic Outlook and Revenue Assessment Committee and JFAC do not agree. So there's consensus on all three this year. State Superintendent Ybarra went before the Joint Finance Appropriation Committee with her budget request about a week and a half ago. Did not change in any manner from her draft request in September of 2017. It's asking for a 6.8% increase, and JFAC will start its budget setting with next Monday with the K-12 appropriation. Our state funding represents in our general fund, our major operational fund, about 2/3 of our funding. And right now, I'm projecting about $1,040,000 compared to current increase in revenue, leaning towards Superintendent Ybarra's request, which is different than Governor Otter's, and asking Senator Keogh if that seemed right to her last night. She concurred with that. She did say that she wouldn't see an increase over about 6%. But really the biggest variable in our state right now legislatively is tax legislation. The House last Thursday passed a bill that would decrease state revenues from current by 3% or $104.5 million. That mirrored what Governor Otter's budget address at the beginning of the session. It blended what we call conforming Idaho tax law with federal tax law, and coupled it with individual and corporate tax rate deductions. And there certainly is discussion among many legislators that blending conformity and individual, any kind of rate reduction, seemingly they should be in separate bills. And now, Monday, yesterday, was the last day except for special committees to introduce legislation, and yesterday we had another, I lost track, another 4 or 5 tax proposals that were introduced with varying financial impact, cutting more dollars, one including the sales tax, ending sales tax on groceries, which last session Governor Otter vetoed. He's been very vocal that he is not in support of it. And there are really too many details on the varying bills, except to say to you as a board that we're the largest agency budget. We're more than 50% of the state's general fund appropriation, and any kind of decreased revenue, 3% is, that's a lot. And a decrease in revenue, particularly if it's year over year, potentially means a decrease in appropriation. And those are my remarks this evening. Are there any questions?
I read it. I read in the paper today that they're also considering changing the transportation formula, going back to an older formula, which they say is simpler and more beneficial to the districts, reimbursing us at 85% of our transportation costs.
Right. So I've lost track of the years. I'm going to say about 7 years ago. We used to be on what's called an 85 reimbursement basis for transportation for allowable costs. So it wasn't that simple. You really got 85% of your school to pupil transportation back. Anything that has to do with extracurricular, that the state doesn't reimburse those. And they went to what they call kind of a block grant and an 85% reimbursable. And the block grant's 50%. So salaries went from 85% reimbursable to 50% reimbursable. And they cut, after all that, another 10% right off the top to address the recession. The K-12 Funding Formula Committee has heard loud and clear from districts that this 50% reimbursement and 85% reimbursement is administratively very burdensome. And we reiterate that when there was discussion last year, and perhaps reverting back to the 85 reimbursement, we wrote to the House and Senate Ed Committee saying we're in support of that. For example, the Idaho School Boards Association also, in the resolutions that you supported, this is one that it was current, and with more financial analysis, they realized that among all of the school districts that offer transportation, and charter schools are not required to offer people transportation, only the brick and mortar, the 114 brick and mortar districts are required to offer people transportation. They see that each of those districts is impacted quite differently, where the net effect is that districts would lose $2.7 million. We happen to be an outlier. If we reverted to the 85% reimbursable, we would gain, if it was last year, $123,000.
That's what I was going to ask you, if we're on the win side.
Right. Our transportation is about, the whole cost is about $1.8 million a year.
It's not huge.
So there is definitely a sentiment that we'd like to go back to something simpler, but they want to try to.
So the simpler formula benefits the rural districts such as ours?
I honestly can't say we're such an outlier. Like the average cost per pupil for transporting, we are 263% higher than the average because we're so rural.
So the ISBA notes that came out referenced this very thing and said, the line item, the pot, the amount of the money is not changing. They're talking about simplifying it. The amount of the money staying the same, which is meaning there'll be some winners and losers in this. And my question to you was, where do we fall in that? Probably a small gain, but it's pretty insignificant in terms of our entire transportation budget.
Light reading, the final couple of pages are the summary of who wins and who loses.
On that transportation reimbursement.
Yeah, just on transportation.
So thank you. Are there any other questions for Lisa? I appreciate the information and everything you did to organize our conversation with Senator Keogh yesterday. That was very helpful.
Thanks, Lisa.
So at this time, I will hear a motion to approve consent agenda.
Madam Chairman, I make a motion that we approve the consent agenda as written.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
None opposed. Motion passes. Well, that brings us on to emergency alternate route to authorization to new certification for Charles Chesbrough and Jeff Penrose is not here. I assume that means you are the
You bet.
presenter on that.
Yeah, so we have finally hired a PE teacher at the alternative high school. It took us almost 8 months to find somebody. And the tricky part, Jeff did a great job of outlining all the reasons and all the work that was done. Hard to find someone for a .33 job, so we combined them with a parapro position out at Sandpoint Middle School, made it benefited, which definitely helps people.
Yep.
And Mr. Chesbrough is doing a great job so far, and he is close to having his certification. And great job, Melanie. I didn't realize you had met him at a job fair, so that's awesome. I always figure even if we get one person to come in, it's worth the time. So thank you for that. So yeah, I'm hoping that you all will approve the alternate route to authorization, as this was a true emergency situation for us.
So, are there any questions for Superintendent Woodward on that. There was a lot of material presented that kind of outlined the whole process and the background on it. Did you have any questions other than what's written there? No, it's a very clear-cut need.
I think
Yeah.
Jeff covered it very well.
Yes, he did. So if there's no questions, I will entertain a motion for this, and the motion is worded right here on our,
Okay, I move to approve the emergency alternate route to authorization, teacher to new certification for Charles Chesbrough.
I second that.
okay, moved and seconded. Any comments? All in favor? Aye. None opposed, motion passes.
Thank you.
So we're going to go straight into policies. We have a whole segment of first readings, and then we have some second readings as well. So I will hand it over to Melanie Almeida is going to do our very first one. So welcome.
This is a suggested revision to policy 5217, which deals with payroll. And when I brought this to you in June and then October, one of the pieces that we had not carried forward, an oversight on my part, was the opportunity for classified employees to request that they be paid only over the school year months rather than the full fiscal or the full 12-month cycle. The impact to them is described to them very clearly so that they understand what it is that they are giving up. Essentially, is generally 2 to 3 months of benefit coverage and 2 to 3 months of service for per-C retirement benefit. That's explained to them clearly before their request is approved.
Okay.
Unless there are questions.
How many requests are there approximately that,
I checked with our payroll specialist and she said she's maybe had one every 2 or 3 years.
oh, so it's not
Yeah.
not administrative burden?
No.
Are there any other questions for Melanie on this first reading? Because as you know, next meeting, we'll have a second reading, and any questions you have should have been,
So I'm just curious, Molly,
Discussed here.
why would somebody request this?
maybe they have a summer job that covers salary, and they want the more increased salary, and an even, I mean, a lot of our teachers work in summer or other jobs.
Well, and it's not available, this would be only available to classified employees.
Right.
Certified contract states specifically that they're paid September to August. Or if they start later in the year when they start through August. So this would be available only to classified.
Just classified, right.
My understanding is it typically is that they want a larger paycheck for the months that they are working.
So classified employees paid salaries, aren't they typically paid hourly? So they get paid when they work. There's not as much work in the summer, so I would think most of them have less income in the summer.
All of our employees are paid over the 12-month cycle on a budgeted number of hours. They still turn in a timesheet, so if they don't work their budgeted hours, there are adjustments that are made.
But it's spread out over the
Their pay
12.
is spread out over 12 months.
And you're right, this
They
is
may
just the
work-
classified.
They may work 30 hours in a month, but their paycheck would be spread out over the 12 months. So they may only have income that month for, let's say, 22 hours, even
Right.
though they worked 30, because in their summer paychecks are going to catch them up. Those are not, don't quote me on those
Well, if
numbers,
you-
but that's.
Roughly.
If you cut their hours by a third every pay period to spread it out over 12 months, do they get their overtime premiums?
I would have to check with our payroll specialist about how overtime is calculated. They would have to work 40 hours in a week to get overtime, and I believe that's paid in the pay period in which it's worked. But I could clarify that.
I think so too. And it's pretty rare for us to have any employees that are in overtime status.
Yeah.
But I believe you're
Well,
right.
There's emergencies, snow removal.
Sure.
Yeah, it's rare, but it does happen sometimes.
But I'll clarify that for the second reading, just
Okay, great. And it's not actually even in this 5217 that we just read anyway. That's a side issue, yeah.
Overtime is a completely separate. But it's a valid question.
Yep, very good. Thank you. And the second one is a first reading policy that Superintendent Woodward's going to propose.
All right, so this is just our homeless children policy.
Yeah.
And the only change would be, it used to be if there was a complaint as to a placement, which is rarely complaints related to this, but if there were, that it would go to the homeless liaison coordinator, which in our case is Dr. Morris. And then it just kind of follows our regular patron complaint procedure. This new requirement is, and I think it's actually good, it would go through the homeless liaison, then it would go to me, and then it would go to the state level. And because the state wants to ensure that we're making sure that we're taking care of our homeless students and all that. So this is a requirement for us to update our policy.
So I had 2 questions for you. It was adopted in 2008, and I can't recall seeing it until now, so we haven't reviewed it.
No.
It hasn't come before us for
No.
review. How often do we have a
I think
student
we,
through the system that's actually categorized?
I think we probably have 12 to 15 right now. So that would mean somebody that may be living in a motel or
Right.
couch surfing without a regular address, so.
Yeah. Okay,
But-
so that's
but
more
just-
than I,
But what I will do though, because it is kind of, I'm curious every year, I will find out right now, how many do we have in the district? And is that,
it's more a curiosity point because it speaks to, this is a very relevant document. It impacts
yeah,
a larger number of students than I initially thought.
yeah.
Yeah, we had some, I know when I was teaching out at Hope, that lived in motorhomes on Forest Service land.
Oh, and that would be considered a not permanent resident, right, right.
And I even had one that lived in the tent the whole winter up at the mountains. She came to school every day.
That's tough.
Impressive.
Too.
Just out of curiosity, Sean, what's the, how do they define
That was her
homeless?
warm day.
It says according to.
It says according to the,
Whatever that is.
and I didn't go look up
The
that
McKinney-Vento
document.
Act, I will send you a copy of that, because I will get it wrong. But it's basically somebody without a regular
Yeah, I
address.
mean, it makes sense. But
Fixed out.
that's kind of a-
But I will send all of you 2 things. One, how many students currently in our district, and 2, I'll send you the actual McKinney-Vento kind of requirements and what we
Description
follow.
of it.
You bet.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Sure.
Are there any other questions regarding the actual changes to that policy as they're written? No. We're going to go on. Our clerk, Kelly Fisher, is going to present first reading of 3 other policies. So,
Good evening.
good evening.
I'll just start with current policy 1310. I'm asking for a number change to, of course, align with ISBA model policy numbers. And do you want to go paragraph by paragraph, or do you have any questions?
I hope everybody had a chance to look at these drafts that are in front of us. I didn't have any questions that came up. It was helpful, though, to read through it since it's the policies. It's actual setting up policies and all that, so it was very helpful to review. It seems like this is what we've been doing anyway.
Yeah, lots of this is current practice.
Already in practice, right.
It's just updating and, again, aligning with ISBA and Idaho code more importantly.
Okay.
So there's no questions on that one. I'm moving on to the next policy, current policy 1312. I'm asking that we renumber that to 1310, administrative procedure. The only thing that I've added in this one is the superintendent with administration shall develop such administrative procedures.
Right, which is our practice.
Our current practice
anyway.
right now, so.
Okay, and I saw that. That's easy.
Okay, and then I would like to introduce a new policy. It's 1320. It's called management rights. if you recall,
That's what was in,
it was a lot of the strikeouts of, it's actually what you're going to be hearing for second reading, 1205, and this
That's right.
outlines all of your management rights and links those to actual governance of schools and Idaho code. And so it outlines your management rights and your school board powers and duties are kind of the two job lists that you have as Board of Trustees.
So I noticed that whole list of responsibilities was crossed out. So
In
in 1205.
correct, and this 1320 is why it's at first reading right now, because that's where the approval of school calendars down this management rights, you have a list of 14 items now. Some of them are not as detailed anymore. They're more broad, like personnel files. That's if you go into executive session to hear a personnel matter. Those, of course, aren't detailed like they were as much as in 1205.
Right, in 1205, there was the set of 22, and some of them were
Correct.
tediously spelled out,
Correct.
if I could be blunt. And now it's two policies, one with powers and duties, one with the management rights. So, are there,
I can say too that the management rights is directly from ISBA model policy. They use our same attorneys that we employ, which is Anderson, Julian, and Hull, and they approve everything that ISBA puts out as well. This isn't a suggested policy, if I could mention too. This is following Idaho code. This is
by
spelled
law,
out
right.
in code. There's some policies, if just for example, the last one, administrative procedures, that's a suggestion from ISBA, Idaho School Board Association. There's not a code that defines that, whereas management rights is defined by code. And I've listed all of them underneath that define all of those management rights.
just for semantics, just for me, in your own words, how would you clarify the differences of what's in the list of powers and duties and what's in the list of management rights? Management is of specific school functions. I don't want to get it wrong, but there is a difference in those two lists.
There's a lot of cross-reference of both Idaho codes in both. They're split out. If you notice, in 1205, there's some of the exact same codes that are referenced.
At the end, yeah.
You could split them out. I don't know. There's the
Management of schools
organization
as
and
board,
governance of Board of Trustees versus your management rights, your duties of of the Board of Trustees.
All I know is we're in charge of both lists.
Nailed it. That was good. I put her on the spot and she
I
nailed it.
did, I'm sorry, it was a semantics question. We just need to know we're in charge of both of those lists.
Yeah.
But, since this is first reading and it's a new policy, do you have questions specifically about the items here in, new policy 3020? Anything that you need spelled out before we go on?
I just have a question. Talks, this is accepted or restricted by collective bargaining agreement. Is there somewhere where I could get a copy of the collective bargaining agreement?
Yeah, you bet. I will send that
Or if
link.
it's online,
I'll send the link to all of you with the homeless information tomorrow, but it's online. Yeah.
That's a good question. Are there any other specific questions on this policy? None of those should come as a surprise. You know, we've seen them in our duties, our lists before. They're just kind of reconfigured here in this new policy. And actually pared down, so. Okay, if there is no motion needed for first readings, so if there aren't questions at this time for Clerk Fisher. Then we will move on to the second readings of policies. Are you comfortable with that? Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
So second reading, there were no direct questions you had of me at first reading. Going through all of these policies, I did just want to mention that 1205, which we just discussed, is now included. The struck out items, the majority of those are included
In the new
in the new first reading of policy
1320.
1320, correct.
Yep.
So if you had any other specific questions about second reading, I will attempt to answer them.
So there's, if there are no questions, there are three motions before us. So I'll entertain motions at this time.
I'll take the first one. I make a motion that we approve adoption of new policy 1200, deletion of policy 604.9, and revised policies 205.
Do those need to be separated out as three separate motions?
Probably should be separate motions.
You could do separate motions, but he's being very specific
Yeah,
about,
Okay.
it can go either way. It's
Keep going.
Okay.
Assume I did not interrupt. Keep going, you're just
Revised
fine.
policies of 1205, 1210, 1220, 1230, 1240, and 1250.
I second that.
Moved and seconded. Any comments? No comment. All in favor?
Aye.
None opposed, motion passes. Thank you for your work again. So I'm just trying to recall how long we're going to continue revising and reviewing policies. We love it.
We actually only officially have through 1600. However, there's one policy called charter schools that is going to be in a 1700 section, and that's it.
Okay.
So I hope to be finished with the entire board section by April, like with the second readings done by April.
And then, any more on your stuff?
That's what I see right now.
Okay.
We, just so the board knows, ISBA does come out with quarterly reports, so if anything's changed legislatively, in
Yeah, there could
code-
be rolling changes that,
Correct. So
Yeah.
just quarterly, those come out, and Melanie will review hers through Human Resources and Board, like anything that's pertinent, that's when policy comes back to you guys.
so this is kind of an issue related to our policies. I don't know what sort of time commitment this would take, but I know there's some policies we have that have not been reviewed in a long time. And I don't know if we, in my mind, I would be more comfortable knowing that there was some game plan to look at the list and look at when it was adopted and when it was last reviewed. I don't know, how hard is it not to pull up each policy, but the policy numbers, their adoption date, and their review date, just so that I have a sense of the whole without reading through them. I could read every policy.
You're correct, as there's a lot that we haven't looked at for a long time. That's why we started with the board.
Right.
Code, as Pearlie pointed out, so many codes have just changed and moved over to their new coding system that we need to look at. A lot of them that are like practice, current
Right.
practice, so we don't, and they're not required to be updated every year, but we should.
But maybe,
You're talking about 1997 policies we haven't even
Right.
reviewed from them.
Right.
Because we typically, one quick, to add to that, every, fairly often ISBA gives us recommended updates, and that's what typically guides the stuff that we bring
Yep,
to you all.
exactly. Because
But
we know we have to review them.
Yeah, so, but we can do that. Kelly and I can go through and kind of take a look at,
And I would say it's not a critical, time-sensitive divert your attention away from a more important task, but at some point it would be good for our board to know where we stand on that.
If I may, we're just moving from the 100 series to 1,000 series.
Yeah.
Before even I was clerk, that was almost finished. Melanie has finished it off with
Yes.
the deletion of that last 600 policy. We have
Right.
no more 100 series, so if it gives you peace of mind that those are now updated.
Right.
But there's other policy in the financial section, for example, that may need to be looked at, and that could be my next section if the board wishes.
If we, it might be that since this, may be finished in April, then let's just see what sorts of things come on your plate as far as time commitments, because I know you're kind of overwhelmed in certain periods of the year, even more often than others. So I don't want it to become a burden. At one point I thought it would be something one of the trustees would adopt, but I might be letting go of that dream. I didn't see any hands raised the one time I thought it out loud.
This is a good year for policy because it's not a levy
little
or
quieter year.
a trustee election year for me as clerk. So
Right. Okay, well, just keep us posted if anything comes up. So we do have the opportunity.
No, they didn't have a lot on there this time.
I know. Superintendent Woodward.
Just one quick update. I had mentioned to you all that Andrew and I had applied for a 21st Century Community Learning Center grant. We won't find out until around prior to April 1st, we hope, but I found out today, unfortunately, and hopefully it doesn't happen, it's on President Trump's cut list with is all of it's been going on a long time, these 21st Century Community Learning Center grants. Wonderful program. Hopefully it'll make it through. If not, the good news is we're taking all of the work we put into this and looking for other grants that are looking for similar things to fund. So just, I'll keep you up to date on any other grants that we apply for, but hopefully.
What's included in this grant?
This one's unbelievable, and generally speaking, it would allow us at Kootenai Elementary School and Farman Stidwell Elementary School to keep the students from 2:45 up to 50 students at each site, or 60 students, from 2:45 to 6 o'clock at night. And it would be for academic enrichment, academic remediation, as well as physical activity, nutrition. I was in a school district as a principal about 15 years ago that we had a similar program, and we had, I believe, almost 150 students that stayed after school during those times. And they got a meal and great activities, both academic, enrichment, and otherwise. So, and the reason Kootenai and Farmers did well is because we received priority points if we included our highest poverty elementary schools, and those are our two highest. They're all very close, so everyone could have benefited, but hopefully soon I'll be able to come back and share more about it if we actually get it. But nonetheless, we're still actively looking for
other
Would
opportunities.
this program be supported with certified staff after school?
This would be supported by well-trained paraprofessionals. It's about, I think, around $750,000 for 5 years. So our budget includes 4 staff members at each site.
And it has longevity if it happens.
Yes, with professional development, training, support, all those kinds of things. A lot of times in in Burlington, Washington, where I was at, in the Skagit Valley, all of the people, I would say at least 75% of them, were people that were interested in, they were either working on their teaching certificate or they became teachers after this. So we try to attract people that really want to, hopefully further their education as well. So more to come, I hope.
Great.
Yeah.
And let's see, for one more announcement, 3 of us, myself and Trustee Williams and Trustee Suberger, will be going to the Day on the Hill for school boards. It is February 19th and 20th in Boise, and I've reached out to all of our senators and representatives for both District 1 and District 7, of which we have voters in our school district. I've heard back from Senator Keogh and from Senator Crabtree. Both of them, we have scheduled times to meet. We also have heard back from Representative Giddings and Representative Dixon. They both are interested, and we're going to text them before or after the lunch we have as a whole group to get together with both of them. I have not heard yet from Representative Heather Scott, and I think that's the only one I haven't heard from. Or Representative Paul Shepard. But it should be a really great experience. So I'm looking forward to it. I went last year and learned a lot. And we'll report back to the rest of the board and anyone else on all the things we learned. Are there any other announcements?
I saw that Sienna Roget is a finalist for National Merit Scholar.
Yeah.
She got that.
Yeah,
which
that's an
was-
exciting.
that was pretty
So awesome.
That's cool.
cool. Yeah, which I don't know. Maybe it happens more often than I'm aware of, but it's certain.
No, it's
I
definitely
certainly
a
have not heard
accolade
of
for,
that.
Pretty rare.
yeah,
very
for our
often.
high school.
And,
Yeah,
yeah.
Last year.
they had one.
We'll have one last year.
I don't think they have one.
It's exciting.
Yeah, it's outstanding.
And kudos to
So,
her.
Sean, could you give us an update on the strategic planning workshop?
On the survey and the workshops.
Oh, yeah, I was,
I forgot about that.
in March, I'll do a more formal update.
Okay, great.
But we have,
Meeting.
let's see, around 1,200 people have completed the survey. We had, of course, our 3 public meetings, plus I should also remind you all that also attended the Economic Development Summit. We
Right.
had a whole lot of people there give feedback and input. And now our steering committee, hopefully there's not a big snowstorm tomorrow, but we will meet our steering committee and begin looking at the qualitative data that we've collected. And so I've been literally taking every single comment in that survey, and I was using technology
Categorizing
to
it.
tag it, because you could
Yeah.
go to a comment on the survey, click on it, assign it to a tag, and I was doing that, and I thought, okay, no. I went back to the old school way. Kelly, tomorrow, you don't know this, but you're gonna help me with this. But literally, what we did 3 or 4 years ago was take those 1,000, you cut them all up, and you put them
Yeah.
into buckets. So you
Yeah.
honor every comment, but that's a lot of the legwork that I'll do prior to meeting with our steering committees.
Okay.
So they can look at the raw data, but also look at the themes that have already kind of bubbled to the top. So the next several steering committee meetings will be looking at the qualitative data and the quantitative data to land on some draft priorities for you all.
And you'll report in March.
In March, I'll just do a brief update as to where we're at, yeah, and then with the timeline, et cetera, with hopefully, we will in May.
Of these 1,200 responses you've had to the survey, I mean, does that include all of our high school students, right?
Not all. We chose to survey our juniors and seniors. They're not done yet. We did our juniors and seniors last time as well.
So that's potentially over 500 respondents. right
Yeah,
there.
so far we've had about 200 of them have done it.
It's about
So-
200 and students and then.
So we'll have,
Yeah.
of the 1,200, probably 200, 1,000 of them are everybody else, of which about 40% are staff members, about 60% have,
Community
Yeah.
variety of.
exactly.
Weren't you shooting for about 1,000?
Yeah, I was hoping to get over 1,000 to 1,500, so we're doing pretty good. It's
Is it officially closed as of,
not now.
As of this Friday,
it
or no?
was gonna be, it's still open,
Okay.
in case we get some stragglers, but we're gonna leave it open for the students.
okay,
Yeah, so it's still open.
perfect.
Yeah.
Somebody asked me that and I thought it was still open and thought the end date was coming up pretty quickly.
Yeah, it was supposed to be Friday,
Okay,
but I figured I'll leave it open a few more days, because.
No harm.
Might as well.
yeah,
So
okay.
another question for Superintendent, how are we doing on enrollment? What are our enrollment numbers compared to the beginning of the school year?
I could come back with an actual agenda item, since I think these
That'd be
are probably
great,
more
yeah.
appropriate for announcements, but I think
be
that
great.
might be an agenda topic that others might want to come. Our enrollment, just on the surface, is pretty standard with the last 5 or 6 years at this point in the year. We typically start high, and then you lose students as the year goes on. That's just how it works. So no major fluctuations to be concerned about or wonder about.
But we could put it on, maybe in March.
If you would want a formal, actual nitty-gritty, take a look at the last 5, 6 years and trends and stuff like that, we could, if you guys would like that as an agenda item, no problem.
It'd be interesting to also see, perhaps.
School by
weight-
school, I mean, the way you gave us a report.
He did
in
those
September.
numbers right at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, see, that will definitely be a part of also, one of our buckets, don't be surprised, but one of our buckets will definitely be facilities. Part of the
Yeah.
facilities conversation will be historical enrollment data,
And what's
paired
happening.
with projections.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll definitely bring that.
It might be more useful, I know that Lisa Hall's mentioned your conversations with Thorne employees, might be more useful to have an agenda item when there's something to report from that,
That's what
Sure.
it's best
to give relevance
Yeah.
to,
Let's wait until you find out the Thorn info.
yeah,
before we-
so that we don't have that conversation twice, but
Yeah.
we'll
and-
put that on future.
And what we'll do is we'll be back with finance in, let's see, the second meeting
Yeah,
in April.
in
Lisa will do in the first meeting in April. She always does a kind of a state of the state with finances.
Yeah.
She'll include some enrollment. The second one has been typically
Yeah,
me making recommendations to you all. And so we'll include the enrollment piece because it has an impact on our finances in the first meeting in April, if that's okay.
that's perfect.
Okay.
Okay, another question, Matt's not here tonight, so I'll ask you, how are we coming on our fiber optic network? How many schools have we got connected at this point?
Almost all of them, but what probably I would prefer, if you guys have specific questions that I could get prior to the next board meeting,
Yeah.
so I could do some research on those things, because I'm not sure, I think we're maybe one left, but probably.
And then we'll have more formalized conversation and everybody knows it's an agenda item.
Yeah.
You should,
That's
go-
a great
if you have
idea.
questions like that, they should go to Geraldine. We have an agenda meeting, and that's where we set the agenda. So if you would contact us before that, it's a week before. And
Yeah,
for something
that'd
like that, then we can get it on the agenda.
Are there any other announcements?
None for me.
Okay, meeting adjourned.